What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Mindset Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, a Gator, one of the few Gators we've had on the podcast. So it's always special and always fun to have a fellow Gator on the podcast. We have Victoria Wehling, who has done quite a lot of stuff while in college, and now she has a job lined up for IBM. Very exciting time for Victoria. But we're just so happy to have her share her wisdom. And I'm going to go out there and say, Gabe, correct me if I'm wrong, but Victoria might just be the youngest person, or one of them at least for sure, that we've had on the podcast. So, hey, Victoria, welcome to the podcast. We're happy to have you.
Sweet. Thank you for having me. That's an amazing milestone to be on the Mindset Podcast for.
You did it. You made it. And, usually we start off with our warm-up questions, and we have one ready for you. But I do want to give a little bit of context. So we're going to do this one a little bit different because the question has to do with the TED Talk. And I think you know a thing or two about TED Talks. You were the Executive Director of TEDxUF, which is super, super cool, very interesting, a lot of great community service, engagement with students. Why don't we start with that? Tell us a little bit, for those who don't know, what is a TED Talk and what did you do and what was your role at TEDxUF?
Right. So TED Talks are this international program nonprofit organization that brings new ideas to the Red Circle every single year at their conferences. And they have the opportunity for cities or universities to have their independent clubs, independently run student organizations called TEDx, fill in the blank. So ours was called TEDxUF. And every single year we work towards an annual conference to bring, 7 to 10 new speakers on a range of ideas. We get about 150 applications every single year, and we have to narrow it down to 7 diverse talks. And the preparation takes about 8 months on the speaker's end and way longer on our end. But this was our 14th year running, and we are the largest and longest running TEDx in the Southeast region of the United States.
No way.
Yes.
That's crazy. That's intense. So 150 applications and you have to narrow it down to 7?
Yes.
Who narrows it down? Is there like a team that does that works on that?
The curator and the speaker director.
Wow, that's crazy. And what was your role at TEDxUF?
So I started off as a speaker coach. So I got paired with a speaker, Nigel Davis. He went off to work at Microsoft, and he presented the talk, BYOB, Be Your Own Boss.
Oh, I love it.
Amazing entrepreneurial mindseted guy. And so we curated his talk in about 7 months. He presented throughout COVID, so it was virtual, but I kind of got to see the behind the scenes of the recording. And that was a very emotional experience. And that's kind of how I fell in love with the club. And so that next year, I was able to be the speaker coach director. So instead of getting my own speaker, I was able to coach the 7 coaches in how to teach their speakers on the elements of a TED Talk, how to get their speakers stage ready, what deadlines they have to be meeting. And so that was also amazing. I had my hand in 7 talks. And then this past year, normally speaker coach directors or speaker directors go into the curator role. And I was kind of fed into the executive director role, which is managing all 7 teams, not just the speaker side. So that's production, the partnership, media. So I was juggling a ton of different teams, wearing a lot of different hats, and I had to plan. And I definitely learned a lot this year directing the goals for everybody. That's for sure.
That is insane. That is so cool. Gabe is blowing up my phone because we gotta move on to the next topic. But I could stay here for 2 hours and talk to you about your role and your experiences. And we'll get to it now in a little bit. But just to jump into the warm-up question. So very simply, but also kind of a hard question because I feel like you would probably have a lot of favorite TED Talks. But what would you say is your favorite? I mean, I'm sure there's thousands, if not millions of them out there. Which one is your favorite TED Talk? Which one do you recommend to our listeners?
Right. Okay. So there are thousands, and I think because they touch on so many different topics, that's why people love them, because anyone can relate to one. So my favorite is always, what I'm going through in life. And this one was Why Your 30s Are Not Your New 20s, which is a little bit ironic. I heard you guys talk about this on a previous podcast. It's by Meg J. So she gives a ton of statistics of how, 80% of people have their most life-defining moments happen before 35. Half of Americans are married to, dating, or living with who they're going to marry by age 30. And the first 10 years of your job exponentially predict your salary for a good portion of your life. And, there are exceptions to those rules. Starting companies, anything can happen for anyone. But for a good portion of Americans, these are the statistics. So a lot of people our age are waiting later to get married. They're waiting later to find that dream job to start that company. But what she really stresses is that your 20s are your developmental period to set up your success for your entire life.
That's so interesting. And yeah, I'm pretty sure we've mentioned that once or twice in the podcast, that people are so hung up, especially in their 20s, right? To like kind of, have fun, and don't get me wrong, in any context of the way. Like we encourage people to do what they want and have fun on this podcast. But that sometimes people get to 30, 35, even 40, and they're like, where did my life go? And then now they're kind of taking things a little bit more serious. Maybe now they have a job, or not. I'm hope by 40 someone has a job, but now they have a family, they have a mortgage, they're married, they have their white picket fence. But I definitely think our generation is trending more towards, younger generations being very hungry for what they want in their career earlier on. One of my favorite TED Talks is by Simon Sinek. And he's a very well-known speaker, author, and we reference him a lot on the podcast. He talks a lot about leadership, and in this particular TED Talk, he was talking about how leadership and how good leaders make you feel safe. I don't remember exactly where it was. I believe it was in Canada or British Columbia area. But he was even mentioning how in certain, back in the military and even today, you would get a Medal of Honor if you were, to sacrifice yourself for other people's gains, right? And it's kind of interesting if you look at it in the context of the business world and just the workforce. It's like we're given bonuses and we're given praise when we uninherently kind of sacrifice others for our own gain, right? Whether it's for, hitting the quota or hitting the numbers. And sometimes I feel like our this generation that we're all a part of, we're really striving to work collaboratively, and not to crush someone else's dreams to get your own. But I feel like that's something so interesting that our generation has to do with. And I have so many questions as you're talking about your TEDx and everything. And I've always been so obsessed with the idea of the TED Talks and how they're all so particular and so specific, and how there's so many all over the country. But I guess a question that I have selfishly is like, how does one get involved with TEDx? I didn't realize that it was an 8-month process from the speaker standpoint to get involved. Like I felt like, hey, we got a TED Talk in 3 months. You guys want to be a part of it type thing. And there's 150 applicants. Walk us through the process of what it looks like from like application to being selected to be on a TED Talk.
Right. So it's funny you brought that up, because a common misconception is that the TED Talks are not memorized. But the beauty behind a TED Talk is you're having a 13 to 18-minute talk completely memorized. And that's what takes so much work. And that's why you have to get these people onboarded super early. So we put out our applications. A lot of our applicants come from in-house people. So those are professors that know of the club, that strive for a relationship with us. They've tried a couple of times to do it, or peer-to-peer networking. So by word of mouth, we're not getting our really big applications from Instagram, let's say. So once we get all the applications, we read through them. There's such thing as a through line. So when you apply, we like to have an idea, a concrete idea, and something you can carry on throughout your entire talk and have some statistics backed behind it. There are some red flags we look for, such as pseudoscience. You can't have that. You can't be talking about anything super politically divisive and us versus them outlook. So we narrow it down based on all the little guidelines that TED gives us. And then we pick our lineup based on, let's say, how many science talks to self-help talks we want, or creating a diverse range of talks that the curator always sets the site for. So the curator and the speaker director will sit down and interview those people. And then once they're onboarded, we have a speaker mixer right away. We try to get everyone acclimated with each other. And then in the background, the whole time, we're training speaker coaches who we then pair off with each other based on their interest. So from there, the outlines come, the drafts come, PowerPoints come.
Do you have any crazy stories, good or bad or funny, any stories that come to mind when you worked in any capacity with TEDx?
Um, we have some memorization issues, but that just takes
Yeah.
a speaker coach meeting with their speaker, every single day for 2 weeks before to get them stage ready. A lot of people have kids, newborns, so they're trying to balance doing that. I haven't seen any super crazy stories, but I would say the memorization is what really, really gets people.
Fair enough. That's hard. I mean, trying to remember something for an 18-minute speech, memorizing it is one thing, and then being on the spot with people watching you is another thing, and trying to memorize it too. I can't imagine the kind of pressure. But hey, man, there's great people and great coaches like yourself that I'm sure do a great job of preparing that person. But Victoria, you yourself have been in a lot of different leadership positions in high school, college, and then now you have, like we mentioned, an exciting job lined up at IBM, and I'm sure you'll become a leader throughout the process, whatever that will look like. Something that we try to figure out, and I think it's one of those long journey kind of figure out situations where there's never a real answer, or it's very different per person, is how people define leadership or success. So I'm curious to know, based on your experience, Victoria, as a leader and a future leader too, how do you define leadership, and what qualities do you believe are essential for an effective leader?
This is a good question that I think I can relate to now after my experience the past year. So I've definitely learned that leadership is not a one size fits all. There's no pre-written definition that will work for everyone. Why? Because it's based on human relationships, and your personal human relationship is going to be different with every other person on that team. So for example, you can go read a book about it, but you can still have problems on a team you're leading. And that's just life, and that's just human interaction. But I think I would define leadership based on a set of values. So how do you communicate? Essentially, leadership is working towards a shared goal, a shared mission, and you might be assigning tasks, and you might be assigning tasks to people the same age as you, and the only thing defining you and that person is a title, which essentially means nothing. So you really want to motivate people. You want to treat them with compassion. You want to see what really motivates them. Do they like to be micromanaged? Do they like to be let alone? Do they like a final deadline? Do they like you to be checking in on them? So I think once you can communicate what you want and open the flow for a conversation between both of you to achieve it, that's the first step. And then something that really, really helped me, and I think I will continue to implement throughout my life, is writing out my leadership values, per se. And what that means is that a task I had for other members on exec this year was writing out, one phrase that they wanted to revert back to throughout the entire year. And the mission behind this was that I knew, times could get tough. So we would have these phrases to refer to almost as a rock that we decided before any disputes happened, stuff like that, obstacles. So mine personally was, I wanted the team to have a yes can do mentality. And this does not mean blindly saying yes to everything. It means challenging the new ideas that people bring to you. So what does that look like? If someone comes up to you on your team and they want to implement a new idea and it has been done before and it hasn't worked before, you're not immediately telling them that and shutting it down. You're offering them the insights of what hasn't worked before so you two can work towards the new goal. You are asking them questions. You are appearing engaged, interested. You're not hiding behind your laptop or on your phone seeming too busy for their ideas. So I think having that said very early, it almost motivates your team to want to think of new ideas so that they can work with you to achieve them.
Victoria, I think leadership, and based on what you're saying and just from our experience talking to people, it's more of an art than a science, right? I feel like people they can get the theories down, they can get the techniques down, they can get all of that, and they can read all the books and listen to all the TED Talks. But at the end of the day, I'm a big person on relatability. And if you can have someone that is relatable, that you can really talk to and go to, and they can come down to your level or go up to your level, I think that's such a huge attribute for a good leader. And it's almost like, because there's so many different ways that you can lead as well, whether you lead by example or you lead vocally. And I think the best leaders are those who can kind of balance and mix the two. But we actually have, I feel like, something very interesting in common, is because here on the Mindset Podcast, we get the chance to talk to so many leaders like yourself, so many people that have gone through the journey. And you, which I might even say is a little bit cooler, because you get to experience this live with people on stage with different speakers that come from all over the world. We have, I feel like, a similar experience with different leaders. And I guess my question to you is, in all that of experience, what did you ever get, like, a good piece of advice? Or maybe there were several. I know for us, I'm sure there were too many to count, but was there ever one person that maybe gave you a piece of advice that you really will forever kind of hold near and dear to your heart, and as you continue to build your career?
Yes, for sure. And again, this comes from one of the TED Talks Fernando Paz gave 2 years ago. And it's an element that you guys probably know, but he put words to this idea that everybody has, and it's called picking up the popcorn. It's something he phrased as he used to work 15 years old at a movie theater, and he worked for, I want to say, his uncle. And his uncle told him, Fernando, I'm not going to be giving you work every single day. There's not much to do, but what I do need you to do is pick up the popcorn. When you see it on the floor, do it without being told. So he implemented that throughout his entire career, as in seeing opportunities to innovate something and taking the initiative beyond to himself. And honestly, I have done that in smaller ways. I don't have this established career right now, but as a 20-something-year-old who just graduated college, the way I took that was, in internships, they don't always have a lot of work for you.
Yeah.
So what so many 20-something-year-olds do is they sit on their phone and they scroll, or they read a book, and they do anything other than work. And so I challenged myself to use the 8 hours I was being paid for to be there to just watch YouTube videos to further my knowledge in whatever I was working with. And so, these rabbit holes led to different ways that I could be doing my tasks, in a more efficient way. So I would redo my projects with the new Excel thing that I learned. And so I would then be able to teach the company how to do it better. And so I would just say challenging yourself to use your idle time to pick up the popcorn in your everyday life just means learning and taking the initiative.
Wow, I got to tell you, that's great advice, and I could tell your mindset is so far ahead of so many young 20-year-olds that we that are out there. Something that a lot of people struggle with, and I think all of us at one point had to struggle with it. If not, maybe some of us are struggling with it right now as leaders in different capacities, is knowing how to stay motivated in the hard times. We mentioned a lot on the podcast that when things are going well, it's easy to look good. It's easy to feel good. It's easy to get up there and do a great speech when things are going well and everything's flowing, things are going as you want. It's of course, it's easy to do everything. But in leadership, we know, Victoria, that it's not always easy. There's some ugly times, there's some hard times, and when you're a leader, and that's just part of the role. A lot of leaders, I find, struggle with knowing how to continue that motivation, that hunger that was once there when they started, let's say, a business or a team or whatever. How do you stay motivated when things get difficult in your personal life, in your career? You can take this in whatever angle that you want.
Yeah, this is a good question, because life is all about obstacles. Nothing's perfect. And that's the name of the game. This year, I've definitely learned what has helped me personally is to not take things as seriously. People will tell you it's discipline, and I'm sure you guys have little things you do every single day that you do, whether or not you're having a good or a bad day. But at the end of the day, you are breathing, bills are being paid, you have a roof over your head. People before you and people after you will probably go through the same exact problem. So if you can take yourself out of the center of the world for a second and almost laugh about it, then you can jump back in with a better mentality.
That's great advice, and I feel like that's something that we're all learning. And if COVID didn't show us, I hope something will, because that's something I've definitely taken for granted. Is like we can all get stressed with the mundane and with the little things, but at the end of the day, like you mentioned, we're still breathing. We still got food on the table. We have so much to be grateful for. I think gratitude is one of the biggest things that we can, as human beings, and even more so leaders, can definitely add to our repertoire, if you will, of characteristics and attributes, is because it's easy to get caught up in the little. And I think that's such great advice. And again, like Anthony mentioned, I feel like you've done so much in, your short life. Really, we're all so young on this call, and I feel like we're all striving for more. But maybe you can give some advice to the younger you, or maybe it is the 18-year-old that is applying for colleges and want to get involved and want to get in the internships. And what mindset did you have at that point, and what maybe shaped your mindset to be a little bit different as you graduate? And what advice would you maybe give to either your younger self or to someone that's getting into that stage of life to prepare for the workforce as they come out?
Okay. So I actually have a younger sister going to UF next year. So I have
Nice.
given her plenty of advice. The biggest thing that my parents told me entering college that shaped the way I took every opportunity was that I am there to learn and everything else is a distraction. Now that is extreme. Yes, college is supposed to be fun and you're supposed to take in a lot of new experiences, but that helped me pick where I wanted to put my time. Whether it was saying no to a social function to go to the library, I realized that that was my priority. So I never felt this fear of missing out because I just knew what my goals were and what I needed to do to achieve them. So I think, again, listing the value before you go into college helps you make those decisions when things get tempting or times get hard.
I agree 100%. You're right. Just fresh out of college, both of us, I think any university you go to, there's a lot of distractions. It's like the hub of distractions, right? It's like the point in your life where a lot of us are going away from home for the first time. We're on our own. And if we're not on our own, we're in a big city or whatever. There's just so many distractions. Mostly, I mean, they're well, granted, all right, I was a part of a lot of extracurricular activities that had nothing to do with academic stuff, but again, it's whatever balance works for you. But I'm talking mostly about the distractions maybe that are not so helpful, functions and different things like that I think it'll all play out as long as you have your priorities straight and you know what you value, and you go there with that mindset, and then you can have fun, of course, and join different clubs that give you a great network. But I kind of want to bring it back now to the TED Talk. I'm still fascinated about that and the great work that you did. What are some practical tips, Victoria, that you might have for someone when it comes to public speaking? And I was actually talking to Gabe right before we hopped on this call that we haven't really had anybody in our 704 episodes that we've had to talk specifically about public speaking and how to do it right. Public speaking is something that so many people are afraid of, and rightly so. It's a scary thing. How can people, I guess, two-part question for you, Victoria. How can people, one, overcome that natural fear, at least it feels like, as far as it being natural? And two, once people have the courage enough to say, yes, I'll do it, how can they be effective in getting off their message?
So I can break this one down to a science, which is a good thing. If you write down your talk and you have that on paper, so essentially step one, write your essay, write your talk. Don't try to wing it. A lot of people try to record themselves talking and they'll use that as their speech. No amazing TED Talk has ever been written that way. Write it down on paper, because then you can have other people read it and help curate the words to make all the grammar and everything flow nicely. So once you have that story on paper, I would say give yourself an amount of time to be able to memorize it. So not everyone is writing an 18-minute speech. You might be giving something that is 5 to 10 minutes. Putting in the muscle memory into memorizing it really helps you on the day, where you can then just go and spit it out and get super engaged with your audience, rather than the fear of, am I going to remember the next word, or am I going to freak out if I skip a paragraph, stuff like that. I think it's muscle memory and it's practice, and anyone can get up on the stage if they just have it memorized.
How important are stories? I've realized that some of the best speakers out there, TED Talk or not, or just, on a podcast or whatnot, at least for me, what always pulls me in, especially in the beginning, is when they share some kind of story. So how important is stories, would you say, to public speaking? And the second part of that question is, for somebody that's saying, wow, I mean, I'm a boring person. I don't have any exciting stories like a Simon Sinek or a Gary Vee or an Eric Tom. I don't know what to say. What do you say to that person?
Okay, so the first observation you had, stories, that's great, because that is a huge staple for TED Talks. Chris Anderson, the curator of TED Talks, not TEDx, he kind of breaks down TED Talks as every single sentence should be the stepping stone to your story. That's why they're only 13 to 18 minutes, because you are only putting in there the words that help you achieve your point, that relate back to your through line, that are really, really focused. It is not a speech, it's a talk on one idea. So stories are TED Talks, and that's what makes TED Talks stand out, is that they are pretty much all stories because everything in it is very specific to one idea. What would I tell people who don't have a story? I think I relate to that. I think you guys relate to that. We're at a point in our lives right now where we don't have that much credibility. We're just kind of going and seeing what works and just clinging to what we're interested in. I would say that if you're a new person and you have a different experience than the person sitting next to you, you have an amazing story. And if you can just be confident enough to try to relate that message and what you've learned to a lot of people, it will take you a long way in public speaking.
I think that's so valid, and I'll be completely honest here, being very vulnerable. I passed my speech class by the skin of my teeth, like barely passed, right? And I remember very vividly, kind of like what you were mentioning, Victoria, that like, I mean, it was one of my very first interactions of even being in public speaking, and Anthony knows this more than ever. He's the one always giving the speeches, Mr. Politician over here. I'm the one just rolling the camera, but nonetheless, I remember me kind of fumbling my words just because I was always worried about what was going to come next, right? And I wanted to ask you a little bit. Obviously, the people that you guys are having on your TEDx panels and such are people that are much more experienced. I might have some public speaking knowledge and experience before. But for someone that maybe wants to get there one day, or for even me or for anybody listening that maybe wants to improve their public speaking and wants to be a little bit more vulnerable, and a little bit more comfortable on stage, how important is practice? Like, how can someone get in front of an audience without, being on a TED Talk stage? Maybe it's just as simple as getting like on an IG Live or so. I don't know. Like, what tactics or what practical tips do you guys have for people that want to just improve their public speaking?
This is a good question. Now more than ever, we have social media. You can create videos. I think even if it's practicing in front of a mirror, that's huge practice. Taking your phone out and recording yourself. I know before I had to go on stage just to give the introduction, I recorded myself to see, what words I was naturally using versus what I needed to memorize. So if you can record yourself and look at yourself through someone else's eyes, that will help you improve a good amount. And then other than that, if you want to give a TED Talk one day, it is very possible that you can. There are so many TEDx's you can apply to. My advice is take your time, be patient, learn, because you might not be ready to give one right now.
Right.
You might be better suited 5-10 years down the line, but so many professors come in and they're also just as nervous as everyone else on that day, because the idea of a TED Talk and practice makes perfect, recording yourself, but at the end of the day, memorization.
Victoria, as we wrap up here, one of the great things about social media, as you said, or this digital world that we're living in now, is that pretty much everything that we post online, YouTube, anywhere, I like to bet it'll be there for a couple years, a number of years. So it's cool, and that's kind of leading to say that oftentimes when people ask us or we ask our guests what they want their legacy to be, it's really a unique moment because it'll be here forever. Your kids can come back and watch this and see what they want your legacy to be. So I want to give you this opportunity as we wrap up here. What legacy do you want to leave behind? You've gotten off to such a great start in your life. Your mindset is, I'll tell you, Victoria, phenomenal, impressive. I mean, there's so many words to describe the way you think, and I applaud you for that, for being so young and thinking this way. What legacy do you want to leave behind when it's all said and done?
Wow. I don't want to limit myself to one thing. If I leave a legacy, it'd be that I, let's say, was a well-rounded person. I have so many interests, and that's why I'm drawn to TED Talks, because you can listen to one on literally any subject under the sun. So I want to have a legacy that I tried out everything, and whether or not I succeeded or failed, I want to not be afraid of failure, and I want to just be open to any path I come across.
Boom. I love it. What do you think, Gabe?
I love it. I mean, here at the Mindset Podcast, we always like to say, and I'm kind of piggybacking off of what Anthony mentioned, but we always look back to that reference of like, oh, like you're the character of your own book. And we actually like to rebuttal that. And we like to say like, no, you're not the character, you're the author of the book. And we believe that we're writing our book every single day. And at the age that we are now, we believe that you're writing your book, Victoria, every single day. And we're so extremely blessed to even, be part of this together. And now we're well connected and you're part of the Mindset family now. You got a really cool job coming up. We're very excited for you for that. Why don't you just tell us a little bit quickly about what you have going up, coming next for you as, you kind of step into this new season?
Yeah. So all I know is that I have a job. That's it. I want to be a sponge. I want to learn as much as I can. I definitely am not graduating thinking I know everything. Like I said, I want to see where the wind takes me. I want to learn things that I don't think I'm qualified to learn. I want to put in the work. I want to just take it on with a good mindset. That's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck to you in the future. And I know we'll see you around either on a TED Talk, on YouTube when I click it one day or something or other. But thank you for being part of the podcast and sharing your story with us.
Thank you both. This has been an honor.